So, quick reminder about the Aya healing pyramid, of course, because this is one of those lessons. Um, the Aya healing pyramid is a three, or is a tetrahedron. So yeah, there's information on all three sides: side one, side two, and side three. And side one is the blue side, the names of the layers. And we have now talked about, we have had a layer on the spiritual layer, sorry, a lesson on the spiritual layer. We've had a lesson on the psychological layer, the emotional layer, the bioenergy layer last week, and this time it's the material body layer. Okay, and side two is the green side, and that is the self-healing exercises that we apply to each one of those layers. So for the spiritual layer, it's the journey of meditation. For the psychological layer, it is the broad category of awareness of the mind stream, because it all starts with having awareness of the mind stream, and then we went into the different exercises, afflictions of the mind, and then rewire your mind. And then for the emotional layer, it's karma emotion work, which is there's quite a few different exercises there, but one of the most important ones was emotional meditation. And then for the bioenergy layer, it's energy breath work, of course, breathing exercises. And this week we're on the material body layer, nutrition and exercise. And then side three is the yellow side, of course. It's the results of self-healing. So let's get on with the material body layer. So of course the material body layer is the most known about naturally, and all of you know plenty about the material body layer, so we're not going to spend a lot of time actually learning about the intricacies of the material body in this lesson. We do have some lessons on anatomy a bit later on. And don't forget that as you go through this lesson, think of it as part of the pyramid course, is what we're trying to teach to the general public, basically. And there is so much information out there about the material body, of course, that we don't want to try and just reproduce stuff that is very well known already. We want to try and give this lesson with a slight slant on things and try and make people think slightly differently, and maybe things that they haven't thought of before. So the material body layer, we call it the material body layer because it's made of matter, it's made of material energy, and it's we could say mostly what mainstream healthcare is all about. That is changing these days, of course, with mental health over the last couple of decades, I suppose. But traditionally speaking, that's what really healthcare was about. It was about the material body. And the reason is very clear, isn't it? It's because you can see it, you can feel it, you can touch it. It's right there. You get the symptoms immediately when you're ill. And that's what most systems in conventional medicine have been focused on, because conventional medicine is an evidence-based system, after the scientific revolution and all that. Most of the research that's been done on the human body is on the material body, of course, because it's the easiest to detect. Now, as we know, there are other parts of the human body or the human systems that are less easy to detect. But the material body is made of matter. That's why we're calling it the material body. Now, I know that quite often people may call it the physical body because of its physicality, but we like calling it the material body because it's made of a type of energy. It's material energy or matter. Because there's other parts of our body, as we know in the bioenergy layer, there's other parts of our body that's made of different types of energy. A magnetic energy, it's just a different type of energy, but the actual energy is the same. The building blocks are actually the same. So in the material body, it's made of atoms and molecules, isn't it? Atoms, what used to be thought of as the smallest unit of the physical universe, but now we know in quantum physics that actually it's not the smallest unit. There's even smaller units. So if you zoom into matter, if you zoom into the table, if you zoom into your body, your material bodies, you will see atoms and molecules. Science can do that already with electron microscopes. But if you zoom even closer into the atom itself, you'll see subatomic particles like electrons and protons and neutrons and things like that. If you look even closer into a proton, for example, you'll see even smaller subatomic particles, like things like quarks. But That doesn't really matter for now. The point here is that the further you zoom in and detect more, the more things you will find, or the more divisions you will find, until you get to the point where you find that it's just made of energy itself. Now, in quantum mechanics, they don't really call it that. They call it fields of probability and things like that. We're not going to get into that. We'll talk about quantum mechanics a little bit in anatomy when we first start the anatomy lessons, but that's for another day. But basically, the material body is made of energy. Let's simplify it like that. It's made of material energy. Now, in the pyramid course lesson, we go into a little bit of anatomy. We just go through each system very briefly. I'm not going to do that here, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to introduce you to the program that we use, or the app that we use in Network Healers, or that we're trying to implement into Network Healers. Because when you're sending energy healing, it's very, very useful to have a picture in your mind of what you're doing. So we have a 3D modeling software that we try and use whenever we're talking about a particular condition in the material body. We actually get the software out and actually find it in the body so that we can see where we're sending that energy. We can see what it looks like. So I'm just going to stop showing this and go to another app called Complete Anatomy. So here we go. Now, I don't know if any of you have used this before. I know some of you have used it before in Network Healers, but it's a very useful app. You can get this app for the desktop, for the iPad, for the iPhone. And what we're hoping to do is actually get a organizational license. So we haven't quite implemented this yet, but you can get a license where all of the people in your organization can use it. So in Network Healers, hopefully soon we'll be able to have this installed on everyone's computers so everyone can use it whenever they want. So yeah, it really helps with learning the body, really helps with learning anatomy, because it's just so visual. It's so good, isn't it? Just takes it up a notch from looking at pictures online and things like that. And it's going to be really, really good for Network Healers. My other presentation now, bear with me. Right then, so let's go on to discuss the factors affecting the health of the material body, because there's quite a few different factors that affect the health of the material. Firstly, let's talk about genetics. So genetics, now I'm sure most of you are fully aware of what genetics is, but let me just summarize quickly. The blueprint for the body, the blueprint for the material body. It's a set of information or codes that relate to building the material body and sustaining the material body through the person's life. And every single cell has a set of information or codes or programming. And this information is held in the nucleus of every cell. And it's held in DNA strands, of course. DNA. Everyone's heard of DNA. Now, DNA has this double helix pattern that you can see here. It's twisting round. Two helixes twisting round each other. And inside those double helix, there are these little rungs of the ladder that you can see. These are actually called nucleotide bases. Now, I'm going through this a little bit just to give you an idea of how information is held. These nucleotide bases, the order of those nucleotide bases actually form a code. And there's 4 of these bases. And a bit like letters, you could say that this forms a language. So the information that's held in DNA can be considered a type of language with 4 letters in it. And that information can code for all the different things that are, or the different items or the different characteristics of the human body. And they can account for all the differences between different people. Now, this is a type of programming, isn't it? Now, I want to use that word because when we start talking about subtle energy and healing energy, we're also going to use that word, programming. Because healing energy is a type of energy with a programming on it. Now, we know from the bioenergy layer, we know that there are lots of different types of subtle energy, different frequencies of subtle energy. And when I say subtle energy, I'm talking about magnetic fields, really, different types of magnetic fields that haven't necessarily been detected by science yet. And all these different types of magnetic fields can actually hold different types of programming. Now, when we say the word energy anatomy, we went through that last week, didn't we? Energy anatomy is, say, a chakra or a meridian system. And these are types of magnetic fields, very weak magnetic fields, that actually hold structures to them. How do they hold structures to them? Well, they have a programming to them, they have a coding to them. So I'm making the parallel here between the material body and the energy body, that there are similar systems in place. Because really we are one system, we are one unit really, that the human being, the human system. We can separate it out in all these layers, but ultimately we are a completely interconnected system, and these different systems or ways of working get repeated throughout all the layers. So DNA is a type of programming, a type of language, and I will add here again, this type of approach, this language approach, actually goes further than the human being, because when we talk about the universal trinity lesson, that is, how is the universe constructed, akashic information, then we see that there's a similar thing going on even at the level of the universe. So this concept of language is very, very important. Oh, akashic, AKASHIC, akashic. But the word, the noun, I suppose, is acacia. That's the word. If you're going to look up the concept of acacia, it's got an A on the end, and I use akashic when we say information, akashic information, and that's the same acacia that is referred to in very popular term akashic records. And we don't talk about it in that way, to be honest with you, because I think there's a lot of misunderstandings out there about what it is exactly. But you know, that is the term that most people know, akashic. Right, okay, yeah. Well, Google it and see what you think to start with. All right then, so do we have any control over our genetics? That's the first question. That's a question for you. So that's the first thing or factor that can affect the health of the material body. Do we have any control over this? What do you think? Yeah. Okay, so that's a good answer. I mean, what I would go on to say is that traditionally speaking, people would think they don't have any control. So it's a very traditional way of looking at genetics, that you're born with a set of genes and you can't alter your genes. But new research has shown that genetics does change throughout the course of our lives. So yes, you're right, you can change your genetics in certain ways, and you can change it just by the way you live your life. Because the new field in genetics, and I say new, let's say 10, 20 years or so, is epigenetics. And epigenetics is the idea that our genes get switched on and off throughout the course of our lives, and those changes can actually get passed on to our offspring. So it's like evolution speeded up. And certain things can actually cause genes to get switched on and off. And our environment can cause genes to get switched on and off. Things that happen to us, experiences, emotional states, these kind of things can switch genes on and off, can regulate our epigenetic landscape, they call it. So we do have a level of control over our genetics. Now that's one level of control over our genetics. Now there are other levels of control that we can have, and now we have to move into the realms of healing. What I've just talked about there was in the realms of science, because genetics is part of science, of course, part of mainstream science. It's pretty much accepted fact. And epigenetics is also now part of the field of genetics in science. But now moving into the field of healing, there are other ways of altering genetics as well. Through healing energy, for example, you can send healing energy and have an impact on somebody's genetics. You can change the language of the code in a DNA strand. You can switch genes on and off with healing energy, and this is going to be part of our research project, the Free Float project. And there's another way that genes can be altered, and that is through higher mind action. So this is more talking about reincarnation, really, but for the souls, for souls that have developed the ability to change the genetics in the material body, they can. And that is talking about people's, or that is referring to the idea of a life plan. A higher mind soul that organizes a life plan before going into the incarnation, and as they're going into the incarnation, they can affect the genetics if they want. For example, and this is not a very nice example, but this is how life works, a higher mind can create a medical condition in that material body for the purpose of burning off karma. So it can choose to have a certain medical condition. And that's a common thing for souls to do, to actually, and it's for a reason. There's a purpose. It can burn off karma because of the emotional reactions that we feel when we have a medical condition. It can actually help burn off. Well, it depends what test we're talking about and what condition we're talking about and what we're testing for. But in some cases, yes, and you can get epigenetic tests right now. You can go and get your epigenetics tested, and you get a big readout, and then you get told certain things of what might improve it, and then I guess if you go and do another test in 20 years, the epigenetic landscape will be very different. Yeah, right. Well, I'm not sure, but about that particular condition. But some conditions are because of errors in the genetic code itself, or errors that it could be an error or it could be a higher mind thing that's only on purpose, of course. But when we say errors, that's what science would call it, a mutation in the genetic code. So some may stay for the course of that life. So it depends whether it's an epigenetic thing, regulating genes, or whether it's an actual mutation in the code. Because mitochondria, as we are finding out, is one of the most important things to our research. It's central to the idea of reincarnation, which we'll go into in later lessons, but it's central to the idea of reincarnation. It's central to the idea of the connection between higher mind and lower mind. So the idea that that our higher minds can alter our genetics before birth, well, that's actually going through the mitochondria. It's using the mitochondria to do it, because the mitochondria actually are a big part of epigenetics, which is a very new thing in science. That they're starting to understand that mitochondria or mitochondrial DNA actually is part of the epigenetic cycle. It can actually regulate the main genome, which is in the nucleus. So the mitochondrial DNA is actually very, very important. We think that there is a higher mind signature in the mitochondrial DNA, which we're calling a higher mind signature, but basically it's the soul signature. And this is how we plan to prove the existence of the higher mind and the reincarnating higher mind. But anyway, that's not for now. So let's move on. So that was two. Sorry, that was one. Genetics, factors that can affect the health of the material body. The second one is our environment. And I don't mean sort of nature here. I'm talking about our surroundings, our local environment, where we are in the world, where we are, what type of surroundings we're in, what our profession is, how we're brought up. Everything to do with our environment can affect the health of the material body, can't it? That's a fairly obvious thing to say, I guess. But do we have any control over that? First of all, that's a question for you guys. First of all, how much does our environment affect the health of the material body? And secondly, do we have any control over it? What do you think? Yeah? And how much impact does it have on the health of the material body? Yeah? And do we have any control over it? You said yes. Yeah. Does everyone kind of agree with that? I was doing a course with social workers the other day, and someone brought up a an interesting point that some people don't have any control over it. Some people can't have any control over it because of where they're brought up, where they live, what country they live in, perhaps, what's going on in that country. And when you're brought up a certain way, it's your conditioning patterns kind of dictate how you act in that life. So is there any control for some people? And then on top of that, sometimes you have to have the knowledge to be able to make any changes. Because yes, you can say, yes, we have control of that. You can remove yourself from a situation, from an unhealthy place to a healthy place, perhaps, or profession, or whatever it is. But you've got to have the knowledge that that is actually hurting you, whatever it is. So maybe not as clear cut as we first thought. Or absolutely, yeah. And I guess I should have said awareness instead of knowledge. But that's kind of what I meant by the knowledge. Yeah. But you're right. It's more being aware. 100%. Okay. Next. Oh, is that an old one there, or have you got a new question there? Yeah. Well, I totally agree. Absolutely, and I'm sure everyone will probably agree with you. It's just good, I guess, to have awareness of the difficulties that some people may face in breaking out of those things. But yeah, totally agree with you that it is possible for anyone to gain awareness and to break out of those difficulties. Yeah, and I think some of what you're saying there sort of moves into the territory of this number 3 as well, because a lot of it, some of what you're talking about there was in the mind, I guess, and. So that leads us nicely on to the third point. So we talked about genetics, we talked about environment. 3, layers of the pyramid. Because quite often, for the most part, people are not aware of the layers of the pyramid and how much the layers of the pyramid can affect health and well-being. Because if you look at the material body layer, look where it is on the pyramid. We know that there's a cascading effect of health and well-being down the pyramid, whether it's positive or negative. The material body layer is right at the bottom of the pyramid. It's got the weight of all those layers on top of it, bearing down on top of it. Quite often we see the symptoms of ill health in the material body first. And that's traditionally speaking. People only take themselves to hospital or to the doctors if they find something wrong in the material body layer. But it could have been festering or materializing for many, many years or even decades before that. And it materializes or it festers in the upper layers of the healing pyramid. And then you only see the results when you get symptoms of ill health in the material. So let's look at this. Sorry, was that somebody? Yeah, absolutely. So I would say that it belongs in environment. So here we are really just talking specifically about the layers of the pyramid here. But you're absolutely right. The layers of the pyramid don't include accidents and things like that. But that they probably belong more in. So let's look at the layers of the pyramid in a bit more detail in terms of the material body layer. And this is also a little bit of a recap of the layers, of course. So looking at the bioenergy layer. Now, this is just a quick reminder as well that we can look at the bioenergy layer in terms of anatomy, like we just did with the material body, or different systems of anatomy. Well, the bioenergy layer is just the same thing, really. So you've got the energy body framework there, then you've got the meridian system of vessels, and then you've got the chakra system there. So just a reminder about the Krebs cycle in the bioenergy layer. So we're moving up from the material body layer into the bioenergy layer. We've got the Krebs cycle going on, that's in the material body layer, but it has a massive impact on the energy body. It has a massive impact because of the energy body. So just to remind you, Krebs cycle is food plus oxygen equals carbon dioxide plus ATP energy. That ATP energy is what fuels the material body. It's what gives us energy in the material body and allows the muscles to work, and all the chemical reactions in all the cells. That all uses ATP energy. The Krebs cycle is part of mainstream science already. What is not part of mainstream science is and is one of our theories that we're going to try and find evidence for in our research program, is that the meridian system carries subtle energy to every cell of the material body as part of the Krebs cycle. That's why we've got chakras that are breathing in energy from the outside. That's why we've got the meridian system to deliver it to every cell of the body. Let me just go back to to make a parallel to the material body that we just looked at. We looked at some veins and arteries. You know, the arteries carry oxygenated blood away from the heart and lungs to every cell of the body. Then veins carry that deoxygenated blood back to the heart and lungs because it's using oxygen in every cell of the body as part of the Krebs cycle. So what we're saying here is that the meridian system of vessels is taking subtle energy or magnetic flux to every cell of the body as part of the same reaction, the Krebs cycle. Now, what happens if there's a lack of flow? If there's a lack of flow to those cells that are needing that energy flow? Well, last week we talked about, you know, certain symptoms like chronic fatigue. It's going to cause chronic fatigue, or fibromyalgia as things get blocked up. But eventually, if there is too much lack of flow, cells start to die. The material body cells start to die. And what happens then? Disease or ill health in the material body. So a lack of flow through the meridian system will cause ill health in the material body. So that's the direct impact that the bioenergy layer can have on the material body. So let's go up a notch, up the pyramid to the emotional layer. And we talked about the karma emotion engine. Karma being a transport system for emotional memory. So how does that impact the health of the material body? Well, what is it that's causing the blockages in the energy body, which causes a lack of flow? What causes those blockages? It's emotional energy. And what causes emotional energy? Negative emotions. Negative emotions cause that negative emotional energy, which blocks up all the energy body, which causes a lack of flow to cells in the material body. And what is causing the emotions? It's karma, of course. Karma emotion. That's why we call it karma emotion. It's emotional memory, and it's the fuel for the emotional cycle. That's what we went through in the emotional layer lesson. So that's the emotional layer. And next up is the psychological layer. So here's a quick reminder of what's going on in the psychological layer. So we have a mind stream in the present moment. The mind stream plus the emotions, because of the emotional cycle, they're linked together, aren't they? Thoughts cause the emotions, but together they influence the memories that are being laid down, which then turn into personality characteristics, which then turn into values, and then the mask identity is governing all of that stuff. Remember the solar plexus being the chakra that governs the identity, where the ego is finalized. The mask identity is governing all the stuff in the psychological layer, but it's also producing the mind stream itself, which then influences all the memories. So we've got that cycle going. So the mask is the king in the psychological layer. Left untreated, the mask is the king of the psychological layer. What's causing all that karma that we just talked about? Well, it's thinking, isn't it? Thoughts produce karma. That's the karma emotion engine. So what's producing all the negative thoughts? It's the mask identity. It's the human ego, of course. So we've traced all of those problems in the material body back up through the layers, and we found the culprit, the human ego, the mask identity. But of course, it is a false identity, isn't it? We talked about that in the psychological layer. It's a false identity. It's not our true identity. It's constantly changing throughout the course of our lives, completely dependent on our surroundings. But it is the culprit of karma, and so it's the culprit of negative emotions, and so it's the culprit of negative emotional energy, so it's the culprit of those blockages, and therefore it's the culprit of health problems in the material body. And of course the solution is the spiritual layer, the true self, which is why it's at the top of the pyramid. And if you remember back to lesson 2, we can understand why there is a human ego. Lesson 2, when we talked about the Aya guide to healing, We can understand why there is a human ego, why there is suffering. It's because the source of the universe creates reality in a separation, creates it in two, positive, negative, or male, female, or light and dark, or whatever you want to call it. It's a duality. And that creates the whole universe of physical form. But the universe, or the source of the universe, loses its self-awareness in that separation. And it becomes ignorant of its true nature. And the journey of life creates individuals. The journey of life creates individual souls, individual pieces of awareness. And the journey back home of the source of the universe is that growing self-awareness until it becomes truly self-aware and it regains its unity. And letting go of the false identity, the false self, the little self, the ego, letting go of that is part of that journey. So those are the layers of the pyramid and how they affect the health of the material body. Do we have any control over that? What do you think? Yep, you're hedging your bets. Yeah. But yeah, accurate. Not always, I guess, because you've got to know about it. Again, it's the awareness thing of it, isn't it? But can we have any control? Absolutely. 100% we can. And that's what self-healing is about. So we go on to point 4. So we talked about genetics. We talked about the environment. We talked about the layers of the pyramid in an unconscious way, let's say. The layers of the pyramid, not knowing about the pyramid. Number 4 is self-care. Because yes, we can impact the layers of the pyramid with self-care. So then we move on to, 1 second. So we can control the layers of the pyramid with self-care. But what about karma? Can we control what karma we produce? Because if you think about it, quite a lot of the impacts that we can feel in the material body in one incarnation may have a karmic, well, they all have a karmic root to them, but those karmic roots quite often stretch back lifetimes. So karma is a bit of a special one. We can impact our current incarnation to a certain degree, but self-care or self-healing has to happen over the long term. This is why it needs many incarnations of this type of work, because we have to stop producing karma in the present moment, and that will impact our future. That's why it's a long process. That's why spiritual evolution is a long process. Journey of evolution, the journey of growing self-awareness. Because we have to stop producing karma, and then that will impact. Any questions before I move on? We should have a little break as well, shouldn't we? All right, should we have a little break? Come back in a few minutes. Right, let's carry on then. So we're moving to side 2 of the pyramid. And for the material body, of course, that is nutrition and exercise. Now, nutrition is a huge field of study, of course, and we've got plenty of nutritionists here today. Nutrition is a massive field of study and a complex one, and it's only growing, basically. It's getting bigger and bigger as more knowledge is found out. So this course, and exercise, physical exercise is also a big field of study. Now this course that we teach to the general public is not about nutrition and exercise, because there's so much information out there and it's such a customizable aspect to somebody's life. And I'm not a nutritionist, and I'm not a fitness coach either. And whoever teaches this course in the future is likely not to be a nutritionist. So what we tend to say is that we don't teach much about nutrition itself, but we have nutritionists as part of AYA if anyone needs any direct assistance with that. So what we try and do is, with the self-healing exercises in this section, is that we try and look at it in a slightly different way. But first of all, let's look at the barriers to nutrition and exercise, because they're massive fields already, nutrition and exercise, and pretty much everyone knows that nutrition and exercise are super important for good health and well-being. But still, there is a problem. Still, there is a massive problem. So there are some barriers that people talk about. And I welcome your opinions as nutritionists as well, if there are any other barriers. But for example, time is always talked about as a barrier. Not having enough time to eat healthily or to exercise, or money, for example. Some of this is true, isn't it? It's easier to eat unhealthy than it is to eat healthily sometimes, if you haven't got much time to look into it. Or ability. Some people do not have the ability, or they are disabled in some way, so they may not be able to spend the time going shopping and cooking nutritious meals or doing exercise. And then you've got the two big ones, I would say. Discipline, self-discipline is one of the biggest problems, and priorities. People's priority levels is one of the biggest problems, and that has to do with time as well. Not putting it high enough on your priorities list. How about you guys? Anything else that we could add into that list? That is fascinating to hear, actually. I didn't think that the NHS would be part of the problem. That is very interesting. So knowledge should go on this list then. Yeah, okay, fair enough. So it sounds like we need to have a specialised nutrition course as part of what we're doing at AYA. That would be great to do, wouldn't it? Right then, so how do we raise awareness in people? Because the knowledge is out there, well, not all the knowledge is out there, but a basic level of knowledge is out there for people to find. But it doesn't make any difference for some people. And I'm talking about personal experience here, because I spent many, many years with no awareness whatsoever of what I was putting in my body. And that was to do with nutrition, alcohol, drugs, you name it. Just didn't care what was going in my body at all. Zero level of awareness. So how do we raise people's awareness about what is going into their bodies? Because that's what it's all about, isn't it? Having awareness. But how do you do that? So this is where we come into the self-healing techniques that we're giving as part of this layer. Of course, it's about nutrition and exercise, but this is what we mean when we say maybe we can offer something slightly different that people haven't thought of to get past that barrier of raising awareness. So the first thing that we want to teach people to do is a very simple technique, and it's called taste meditation. So taste meditation is a form of meditation, of course, and meditation is very, very, very simple. It's a very simple technique, and as you know now, there is a subject and an object in meditation. You are the subject doing the meditating, and the object is what we are focused on in the mind. So if we use taste, the sensation of taste, as an object of meditation, then we are meditating. But not only are we getting the benefit of meditation, this has a massive impact on the whole of the eating process. Because first of all, it starts giving attention to your eating process. If you focus all of your attention while you're eating, if you focus all of your attention on that taste, and you can elaborate it to the sensations in your mouth and teeth while you're eating as well. So you focus intently on that sensation. Next time you eat something or drink something, go and try this. In fact, it's good to do on things with strong taste as well. So if you have some chocolate or something like that, or a glass of wine, or whatever it is that has a strong taste, you can try and find that taste. Where is it in your awareness? It's fascinating when you actually try and do it, because you can't actually find where that taste is, but it's the act of focusing on it that is the meditation. But it gives attention to the whole eating process. Some people might call it conscious eating, but then it makes a habit of giving attention to the eating process as well. So you are using the habit forming part of the brain as well, and you're giving attention to the whole food and drink process. And what happens is that has an impact on the rest of the day as well. So when you're meditating, you're not thinking, you're trying not to think, you're just focusing on that sense, on that taste. So So hopefully in the meditation there is no mind. You are just focusing on it. But it has an impact on the rest of the day because because you're giving more attention to the process, you start thinking about it more and more during other parts of the day. So you're giving more attention to the whole process, and that's where it starts helping with preparing, for example, and it gives you more motivation and enthusiasm to actually start planning your meals and finding out the knowledge, because the knowledge is there, but you can't force people. It's got to come from them, and this is why this type of meditation will actually kickstart that process in people. And then eventually it will spread to the whole cooking process as well. And now we're talking about task-orientated meditation, aren't we? If we're meditating while we're cooking, we are performing a task, and we are meditating while we are cooking. Task, and what that means is that you're focusing on your senses while you're cooking. If you've got a knife and you're chopping some veg, you can focus on the kinesthetic sensations in your hand while you're gripping the knife. If you're chopping whatever veg or whatever it is, you can focus visually on what you're doing. It's a bit like that. Remember, we went through that making a cup of tea example in the journey of meditation. Well, it's a similar thing. You're focusing your mind intently while you are performing that task. So, meditation can spread to the whole cooking process. So you're getting the benefit of meditating, but you're also boosting the awareness about the whole cooking process. Yeah, but for the times where people are able to sit down and have something to eat, it's a missed opportunity if we're letting the mind do something rubbish while we're doing it. It's a missed opportunity because it's a time where people can meditate. And for the people who say they have a too busy life to meditate, well, this is really saying there's no excuses. There's always times in the day where you can meditate, and if you sit down to have your breakfast in the morning, then you can meditate, and you can meditate all day long in all sorts of tasks. Okay, so the next one is about exercise. And here the same concept applies in terms of the self-healing exercise. We start with walking meditation and the rest will follow. It's the same thing, the same process that we're talking about here. You can meditate while you walk. Walking meditation is about using kinesthetic objects of meditation in your body, so you focus on the undersides of your feet as you walk. Now these two, by the way, are part of the pyramid course, but we teach it to the kids as well, and it's a great one for the kids to practice in the classroom as well. Get them walking about a bit and getting them to move their feet around and feel the pressure moving. Feel the sensations in the feet as the feet move around from the heel to the ball of the feet, and you can feel that sensation move around, and you can follow it with your mind, and that's your object of meditation. So while you're walking, you can actually meditate on your feet. Next time you go out for a walk in nature, for example, do a little bit of walking meditation. Do that for 20-30 seconds, and then maybe move to another object in nature, focus on the sound of the leaves or sound of the wind, and then move to something visual that you're looking at, but then go back to your feet again. So you can integrate it in other types of meditation, but walking meditation is a fantastic way to start the exercise process, because the same thing happens. You start to take more of an interest in what you're doing in that exercise, and you can actually meditate in any exercise. I mean, we use walking as an example here just because it's the easiest and the one that most people do. And even if you're just walking from here to the kitchen or whatever, or walking to work or wherever it is, everyone walks a little bit within, most people walk a little bit somewhere. So anyone, or pretty much anyone, can use walking meditation. But you can do it in any exercise, because there's tension points all the way around the body whenever you're doing any type of exercise. So you can place your mind in the body, whatever type of exercise you're doing. So those are the two exercises that we actively teach people in the pyramid course. But it would be great to have a specialized nutrition course one day, which you guys can write. So next, let's talk a little bit about the concept of materialism. because we've been talking about the material body layer. Let's just mention materialism, because materialism is the concept or the belief or the ideology that matter is primary. Matter is the most important thing in the universe. Some people may even go further and say matter is the only thing that exists in the universe. But it's the primary focus. And that leads to an overemphasis or people placing a high level of importance on things like material wealth, material success, material possessions. Now, our current world is drifting towards material. It is a fairly materialistic world that we live in currently. And this has problems when it comes to our health and well-being as well, doesn't it? Because materialism breeds things like fear of death, fear of loss, i.e. fear of losing things, losing people or losing material possessions or losing material success or wealth. And it also breeds superficial and shallow values. What it also does is makes a world devoid of meaning. It removes the meaning from life, and it removes purpose from people's life as well. And we all know that having meaning and purpose is a massively important thing for positive health and well-being. That's pretty well known. But materialism drives the opposite, really. It removes meaning and purpose quite often, not necessarily never. Now, we know what the answer is here, of course. It's the spiritual layer. But not everybody is ready to go through the process of self-realization. The process of self-realization is a return to unity. It's a realization of our true self. Not everyone is completely ready for that process because of spiritual evolution. It takes a long time to evolve, and people are at different stages of their journey. But there is one thing that can actually help everybody with materialism, or can go a long way to helping everybody with materialism, and that is the idea of reincarnation. Now, reincarnation is part of many religions and spiritual philosophies, of course. But as the world grows in materialism, and as the world grows into a more science-based system, an evidence-based system, less people are actually having these beliefs in things like reincarnation. And that means that it's getting less rather than growing. So teaching people about reincarnation, or let's say making reincarnation part of mainstream science, wouldn't that be the best thing to do? Then that removes the fear of death somewhat. Understanding the concept of soul families, the fact that we reincarnate in groups, in families, would go quite far into removing the fear of loss, removing the fear of losing people. And reincarnation, what goes with reincarnation is the idea of spiritual evolution. And that includes the idea of infinite awareness. Infinite universal awareness, the idea that there is no end. There is no end to the true self. And that takes away a lot of fear. There's existential fear. And it also gives meaning and purpose, because we are all evolving along our path towards a goal, a purpose, the purpose of the universe, self-realization. So that's why we want to teach the idea of removing fear, trying to remove fear, but through evidence, to make reincarnation part of our culture, part of our mainstream culture. There has to be evidence for it, because that's what people want now, the scientific revolution and all that. But if we find evidence for reincarnation, then it becomes widespread knowledge, and that will impact so many people in a positive way. Right, so this is going to be a big part of our reincarnation lesson, but in brief, soul family is a group of higher minds or souls that reincarnate together. And this is an example of a soul family, this call, although let's say a part of a wider soul family. So as souls become aware of themselves, and the journey of a soul, the journey of the development of a soul is a very long process, and they start off reincarnating in an unconscious way, just naturally, it's part of nature. Animals reincarnate naturally in an unconscious way. But through the human journey, the higher mind at some point becomes aware of its own reincarnation. It starts to understand that it's reincarnating, and at this point, it starts to be able to understand or see its own karma levels. It starts to be able to see its past life memories. It's becoming awake in a way, that higher mind. Not in terms of, it's a different type of awake than self-realization. It's just we say either sleeping or awake, an either sleeping higher mind or an awake higher mind. And that's part of the development of a soul. But once it becomes awake, it starts being able to communicate with other higher minds. And then it joins a soul family. Soul families are groups of souls, normally around about the same level of development, that reincarnate together. So quite often they will reincarnate into the same lifetime, basically, and then they meet up. You know, this is where you sometimes meet somebody and you realise you just feel like you've known them forever. You just click straight away. Quite often that person is part of your soul group. Yeah, so we'll go through that in much more detail in the reincarnation lesson. Yes, I can. Let me just finish this this lesson, and then we'll talk about it. No worries. It's all right. We're almost done. Just one more slide, really. So I just wanted to go through side 3 of the pyramid. That's all. So we've been through side 1, the name of the layer, talking about the layer. We've been through side 2, the self-healing techniques that we use to apply to that layer. And then side 3, of course, is the results. So this is really just a reminder now, because we've gone through this a few times now, but if we find peace and unity in the spiritual layer, then that has a smoothing out effect of the psychological layer. Because the psychological layer is spending more time in peace and unity and less time in negative, repetitive thought patterns. And at the same time, we are doing self-healing exercises on the psychological layer. So that all has a massive impact on the emotional layer. And we find, in the psychological layer, we find healthy values. And then in the emotional layer, that has a massive impact on the emotional layer, because we are producing more positive karma emotions, less negative karma emotions, and therefore feeling less negative and more positive. And at the same time, we're working on the emotional layer as well, with emotional meditation and things like that. So all that has a massive impact on the bioenergy layer underneath it. And we find balanced emotion chakras, because we're feeling less negative emotions. That means less negative emotional blockages in the chakras, and therefore the rest of the whole energy body. And at the same time, we're doing breath work on the bioenergy layer to enhance it. All that has a massive impact on the health of the material body, because negative energy blockages has an impact on or causes illness and disease over the long term in the material body. And on top of that, we are doing self-healing exercises for the material body layer, like nutrition and exercise, to increase the health of the material body. So that's side 3. All right, that's it then for the theory.